On this Friday, the 7th of June. A look at the top stories that have shaped headlines this week. Now, the much anticipated UDA elections in Nairobi have been postponed, and UDA Secretary General Cleophas Malala is on the receiving end for that decision amid allegations of plans to lock out some candidates who had swept constituency and posts in constituency and ward levels. But why is this conversation important? Now, political experts say that the chaos within the UDA party and surrounding these elections may also be fueling the rifts between the president and his deputy, Rigathi Gachagua. Experts further say that that rift could affect the country's political stability. So, let's begin with you, Maura, when it comes to these UDA branch elections. And, you know, political analysts will tell you it is normal to see chaos and back and forth within party politics itself, because this is a democracy at the end of the day. However, the likes of Embakasi North MP James Gakuya, who is vying for the chairmanship of UDA Nairobi, says there is a plot to disenfranchise him despite having majority of delegates. And so what we've seen is UDA members sort of divide themselves, you know, into two camps. What do you make of the latest postponement of elections?
Number one, I was in a meeting that was agreeing on the dates. So it's not that it's been postponed indefinitely. The elections were supposed to be held today. It has been pushed to Monday. So it's not indefinite. Number two, there are lineups. Yes, of course, there's a camp, Gakuya camp, and of course, Sakaja camp, and anyone else in between. The process has, when we started, the party was very clear on the role and the directions that we're going to take. And we agreed that the elections will be done electronically. And so there have been gadgets that have moved from 7,500 delegates to now that we are talking about 340, and a way of sieving. And by the way, I was elected chair, and I don't know why you are not congratulating me.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, that's on a lighter note. And so there is a process that has happened and has been guided by the processes that we worked on, including voting on a gadget. And so now that we are 340 and the stakes are very high, one camp, the Gakuya camp, is arguing that let's move from the gadget to physical voting by the ballots. And then there's this other camp that is arguing, why are we changing it now? And we are all beneficiaries. By the way, Honorable Gakuya is now a delegate because he started from the constituency level. He was voted by the same gadget, including the team. It's only that the guys who are coming in at the county level who have not tested it, they'll start now from the level that you've been elected before. And so the bigger question is, are we sure and are we safe on the safeguards of ensuring that the gadget is safe and is not being manipulated? And the first process is very easy, and we agreed on, can we publish the list of 340 delegates? That is 20 delegates in the 17 constituencies, or whatever that number is. Can it be made public so that everyone knows who every delegate is? Number two, can we agree on the process of how the election is going to be conducted on that day? Number three, and more importantly, remember the National Elections Board faced these elections. There are about 6 counties that was to start. Correct. Then there's phase 2 with about 14 counties, and then the rest. If we start rubbishing the gadget now, what does it mean to the country?
But Gakuya himself says there was no reason to postpone the Nairobi elections because there are no major issues like the 6 other counties. And so he says if elections are not held this weekend, they should be given a date as early as next week. You say Michelle, a date has already been set.
The elections were done last... Yes, I can show you the letter now. The elections were done last week. For Nairobi on Friday. The ones that there were hitches like in Starehe, the repeat elections was done on Saturday. Ideally, you must give a couple of days. There are people who tied. And so those elections had to be repeated on Tuesday and Wednesday, there were elections. So you could not publish the list automatically if you had more delegates than the 20. So there were some specific positions that were repeated, like in Embakasi South, and a couple of areas that were being repeated, so that we now have a proper register by today. So these processes ended up on Wednesday. Yesterday we had a meeting, and we agreed that the elections cannot be done on Friday. And so once we agree on the register, then every other thing process. And after you agree on the register, you must open the portal for whoever wants to be contesting the 20 positions can come in and say, I want to vie, and they apply.
Okay, so when
and you give it maybe,
you give
it about to Monday. This coming Monday, yes. So they pushed it you give people like 24 hours to register. You must also give a chance for them to verify that their details are as they want them to be. And so that's another 24 hours, and then now you can close it and agree for the processes to start on Monday.
Billy, the Embakasi North MP James Gakuya, vying for the chairmanship, says these are sideshows. He's been accused the National Elections Board of engaging in sideshows, says we need to do this in a democratic manner to the very end. Of course, this is party politics. It is an extension of democracy. But what do the chaos within the UDA and these particular elections, what do they say, especially in matters of democracy?
You know, Michelle, elections by their nature are chaotic. You can look at the South African one. Went smooth, but it's still chaotic in one way or another. So that's expected. What I can say is that the Honorable Gakuya cannot change the rules of the game midstream. If they agreed on electronic elections, it will be electronic all throughout, unless there's another decision that is taken by everybody that is non-contested. Then I think then you can change some rules. I think what he has now, I think when people meet, like now Nairobi County meets to decide how they're going to conduct elections, it's probably a lesson to other counties that when we go for our election, for example, we would want the elections to be electronic to what level, and then from there we would want it to be physical. I don't see a reason why also there cannot be a physical election for just about 300 delegates. That's a very easy election. Yeah? At delegates elections, as you go up, they come fewer, so they can be physical. I don't think it's an issue. The problem here is not whether it's electronic or whether it is physical. The problem here is control. Everybody is talking about it, thinking, I will be more in control if it was physical. The other person is, I would more be in control if it was electronic. So that is what is happening. So it's all about control. And if you don't have the mechanics of control, then you have no business being in this election thing.
All right, advice. When you read between the lines, then you will hear those who say that this contest between Sakaja and James Gakuya speaks to a bigger power play within the UDA party. There are those who claim that the Embakasi North MP, James Gakuya, may have been sponsored to vie for chairmanship by the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua. And there are those who say that Governor Sakaja then has the backing of, allies of the President in this context. In this contest. Is that true? And what then does that mean for the perceived rift between the President and his deputy?
First of all, Michelle, I don't think it would be my place to know what is true or not in UDA because I'm in Jubilee. But then, again, all political players running for office are sponsored, including those ones who are running for at the polling level. I'm sure the MCA here sponsored several people at his polling station and those who became chair of wards, and that is in the nature of the politics. But then the first thing I think we are also forgetting is to, first of all, appreciate the party UDA for taking the party to the people, because that is what has not been happening traditionally in this country. I think the only party that really has had leaders from the grassroots level was the Jubilee Party. And the difference is that we did our things as a consensus agreement and not necessarily an election. What UDA is doing is an election, which is one of the most difficult aspects to run as a political party. I remember ODM tried it, and we all know what became of it. So the fact that UDA is taking this to the people, first of all, is very commendable, and we want to see what then comes out of it. But then about the power play and the politics between Gakuya and Governor Sakaja, I see it as all politics. What Gakuya for me is doing is playing underdog, and politics as a way of favoring the underdog. And the more you cry, the more underdog you become. So it's also a political strategy. So I think it's part and parcel of his style of and what counties of the political candidates party, because that essentially means that that person has proven to the party that he can be able to mobilize support across the county. And so what you'd also see is that everyone running for, I would call it over 70% of the people running for chairman of counties and constituencies are the candidates for governor and MP at that same level. And this election is basically a testing ground. Everyone wants to test themselves and see how persuasive can I be. And that's why Governor Sakaja is very keen on the aspect of the chairmanship of Nairobi, because as soon as he loses the chairmanship of Nairobi, he will be 50% done with losing the ticket of UDA for governorship in the next election. And so that is just the reality of the politics. And so that's why he must really try as hard as possible to ensure he still has control. Remember, even what has been happening in Nairobi County lately, people in Nairobi have not necessarily been the happiest people. There has been a lot of issues with even the flooding situation, and we've seen a lot of things going on. And so Governor Sakaja must be able to really be very keen on ensuring
is having. That's the final. Page 10 of the People Daily that has the usual cartoon, my favorite part of the paper. We'd like to hear your thoughts on the picture on page 10 of People Daily. Speak to us on the hashtag New Dawn on X at K24TV. And so MPs carrying the finance bill of 2024, Wanjiku right behind, and says your opinion matters, but the outcome is obvious. All right? And then we shift now to the front page of the Daily Nation. The top page there says, why Kenyans reject tax bill. And so InfoTrack released results of a poll yesterday that said that 8 out of 10 Kenyans are opposed to the introduction of new taxes on, among others, bread, cooking oil, financial services, motor vehicle, a new levy even on environmentally unfriendly products. And, you know, about 87% of them, you know, are not very happy with the contents of the finance bill. Maura, this concern by Kenyans, when you take a look at page 10 of the People Daily, that their views in this public participation process may not really matter much. Looking at the results of this poll, what do you make of this?
Number one, like I said earlier, is that Kenyans must now stop hiding behind, you know, and coming out very clearly on the issues that they feel are important to their lives. Number one, finance bill is usually to finance the budget. The budget where you hear we are going to do this road, this hospital, all those nice things must come from somewhere. That money must come from somewhere. That's hence the finance bill. And then the finance bill is basically how we are going to be taxed. And as they say, there are two things that are very obvious in life, death and taxes. So we must agree to what level are we comfortable being taxed. And all that chain must also lead us to, if we want a bigger wish list, this money must come from somewhere. So we must balance all those two things. So in my view, the finance, the way it's been structured, MPs must now also come out, do proper public participation with their own constituents, so that when they are representing, let people of Starehe also feel that we told our MP that this is good or bad, and then they be able to stand on the basis of what their people are saying, or make a few adjustments based on that, so that we don't just say we don't want more taxes, we also do not want the bigger goodies that also come with it. That is very important. Number two, and I think is also important for how we are going to look at things, what helps us get this tax? Is the money circulating enough? Is the business environment okay? If you look at the people who have bank loans, if you look at the last 1 year, between when we started 2023 and now, has the interest rate gone up for the ordinary person with a bank loan? If the answer is yes, then it means has your also business also grown commensurate with the taxation that is coming? So if you have a problem there, then it means the taxation needs to be relooked at, whichever side you belong to.
Okay.
And so that conversation needs to be open, and we need to have a bigger, robust conversation about it.
And it's been very open because it's the first time we're really seeing Kenyans so interested in the finance bill.
Yes.
We saw this last year, but this has it seems to have way more interest. However, there's been over 500 groups who appeared before MPs, and they're all saying the same thing. Massive job losses, major economic crisis, contentious proposals, people will lose jobs. But the concern is this will really not matter.
If it doesn't matter, there are other options. That's why we have courts. That's why the judiciary is there. You remember, advice was part of the BBI. When we passed it in the assemblies, it went to parliament, it looked like it was passing, it actually passed. It went to court, Kenyans went to court, and the whole thing was stopped.
Okay.
Right? So the Kenyans must stop feeling helpless with the processes that they've put in charge. We are answerable to Kenyans.
Okay.
Right?
So some of the concerns then coming out to Billy are the planning of the government for the interest of Mwananchi. Because when the finance bill of 2023 came up, we spent a whole year in the courts fighting several clauses like the housing levy. And so the finance bill, I mean, the financial year was moving, right? As people were in court. And so eventually the case came to an end, and the housing levy was restored at what? 2.5%, 2.75%, is it? And then now we have the finance bill of 2024, just like 2-3 months after we reinstated the housing levy, that is proposing a reduction in the deductions of the housing levy. And so while it comes as a relief to Kenyans, we're asking, why is it that we have such an unpredictable tax regime? Who are these sitting and planning these issues for Kenyans?
Michelle, if you saw the KRA official that was hosted by your sister, Media House, I mean, that tells you that people who sit there to decide what to tax and what not to tax have no really grasp of what business go through out here. And it came out that you would even answer a question, a very, very simple question. I will be simplistic in explaining this. When you talk about vehicle circulation tax, tax should not just be about getting money from people. It should be getting money for a purpose. If you talk about circulation tax, do we have a commensurate? Because having a private vehicle is good enough. But is there a public transport system that is more like my private vehicle? Like, for example, the SGR, for example, that helps you. So that when you tax me in the vehicle and I cannot manage, I still can use an organized, safe public transport. We don't see that. But what baffles me, for example, in like the vehicle circulation tax, the person who is going to pass it, who is a proponent of the bill, who is a member of parliament, is probably the person who has the most vehicles. So I'm wondering, are they even thinking that they will be paying tax for even vehicles they cannot use? Well, how many vehicles do you use in a day, Maura? Maybe 1 or 2 in a day? Then some of them have 10. So if these vehicles are valued over 15 million shillings, are you going to be paying 100,000? I also have a problem that if you're going to pass it, then let there be no floor or ceiling. If it is 2.5, feel the weight of 2.5. If you have a 30 million shilling car, pay.
Owners of cars valued at 2 million and below will actually have to pay more. Essentially, in
exactly. Let it be fair. If my car is worth 100,000, let me just pay that lowest. If it is worth 30 million shillings, let me just pay the highest. I think then people would start to get it. So, but overall, as I conclude, I think what we lack is a comprehensive, predictable, and sustainable tax policy. If we do have that, then it would be very, very easy to guide our taxation regime. I was talking to my brother and we had a discussion. We were thinking, these taxes are so many. Somebody talks of excess tax, VAT, you're talking of, sometimes you call them duty. I'm not a tax expert. There's so many. Why don't we just have a simple tax code? Because overall, if I know all these taxes are taking 30% from me, take 30% and go do whatever you want to do with it. But calling it so many names so that you have many, many ways of taking it does not really, really make sense. Have a predictable tax code and a tax policy system that works for the country. Currently, we have none. But on this tax issue, I cannot be with the government because the way it's been introduced, the way it's being rolled out, it's being rolled out like there is no thought process around how business is surviving. People have closed businesses, this I can tell you. Look at the tax enforcement regime that we brought. Do you know you only need to give those people 3,000 shillings, they leave your shop. You do not need to comply everything. In fact, enforcing it by calling them or sending them letters and telling them to comply or submit documents is much, much easier than actually walking to
into
premises.
a physical shop, right?
Because there, somebody, instead of paying 20, they'll give you 2,000 shillings and the whole matter is closed. So, in essence, government is actually losing revenue. And then you cannot enforce what people cannot pay. When you do taxation, if it is easy to pay, no one will go around it. They'll always pay. But if it is punitive, or it just seems punitive, people start to run away from it. So I think there needs to be some order around it.
Advice, what do you make of this? And this comes, you know, we were complaining of an unpredictable tax policy, and this comes just weeks after Treasury released the national tax policy, which Kenyans are complaining is unpredictable. Kenyans have showed public disapproval, high public disapproval of most of the proposals in the finance bill. Where does this leave you?
I think I would want to look at it a bit differently because from the last finance bill that we had last year, I think since independence, that was the time we had the highest level of participation and Kenyans just giving their views in regard to this, because we had been at a place where, in fact, sometimes people did not even understand these processes. They just used to pass and nobody talked about it. So the first thing is that we are at a good place, that as a country we are now starting to have conversations about things that concern us like this. And so for me, it's more about, remember, the process of building a country is not an event. It is purely a process. And so remember, it is not as doomsday sometimes as we want to shape it. And that's why, in as much as I would agree with some of the content, I also have a lot of a disagreement with a lot of what is in the finance bill. But when we shape the conversation towards like what is on Daily Nation and say why Kenyans reject tax bill, I think then that becomes somehow sensational. Remember, these opinion polls, I was part of the Azimio campaign, and we know what these polls also did to us. So they are not things I would really trust so much. So for me, I'm about, first of all, instead of sensationalizing and making it a doomsday for Kenyans, let us look at what is possible and what can actually change. Remember, we are in a country where the president, together with the opposition leader, supported the BBI, and it was struck down by the courts, and the country moved on. We're in a country whereby the sitting president had a presidential candidate, and the people did not vote for him, and he was able to be sworn in. Okay. So we are not as doomsday as a country per se. So when you look at what happened in the last finance bill, we make it look like the opinion of Kenyans does not matter. And when we shape that conversation, we make Kenyans run away from participation. Because we must encourage Kenyans to participate. Because the more we participate, that's the only way we can change the country. The digital taxation was changed because of public participation. The housing levy turned into a tax and had its reductions because of public participation. We had this halting of the finance bill almost to over 6 months because there was a court process. Right. So for me, it's about, this is a bill. The first thing Kenyans are supposed to be pushed towards is go out there and make your voice heard. Okay. And then number two, if you're not very comfortable with what the members of parliament are doing, then you must ask yourself, who is the member of parliament that you elected? Because we cannot be in a country where we keep electing the leaders ourselves, then we sit back and start talking as though we don't know how they came into parliament. Right. So for me, it's about, first of all, let us make our voice heard. We cannot complain without following the process, because that way it just becomes rhetoric and noise. Okay. And then number two, let's look at the parliamentarians. Let every Kenyan call their member of parliament and tell them, this is what I want you to do. So that when we are complaining, we have also been able to do what we are supposed to do, not just sitting and looking like our MPs dropped from Mars.
Honorable Mora, I'll give you the final comment on this. Do you agree with what he says? And there's been proposals that, even county assemblies should engage constituents at the ground level on this finance bill. Has this been happening where you are?
Of course. The budget and finance bill all happen at the county and at the national level. By 30th of April, the budget estimates were tabled in all the 47 county assemblies, including the National Assembly. By 30th of June, it must be passed. The conversation about the finance bill comes 30 days after the 30th of June. that finances this other one. So I think the mistalk when you're talking about the finance bill now. Let's bring also the conversation about the budget estimates and what our wish list look like, so that people have a proper conversation about what are the proposed budget requirements, or the things that people feel should be in the budget, and then number two, the finance aspect of it. So yes, I agree that Kenyans must be more proactive. Let the conversation also be very clear. What are we talking about, and what timelines are we talking about? Again, because you're giving me the final remark, I think what the UDA party is doing is trailblazing. And it's a good thing. I think the other parties should also go into that direction of getting proper delegates at the grassroots level, so that we now have a proper way of registering people to political parties, so that you are held within ambits of a party and an ideology. Finally, the media. This is a very good conversation. Let it also be alive. Let's just not be talking about the politics. Let's also talk about the issues that are affecting people's lives. Interest rates, the economic, the circulation of money, the cost of now with the floods and all those things. How does it affect our businesses? How does it affect our livelihoods? If people are being moved from this house, what are the alternatives that the government is proposing? And what are also the Mwananchi coming up as a way of looking at it?
Let's wind it up there. That's a good note to wind it up on. Kenyans need to have more robust conversations of issues that affect them daily. That is Honorable Chege Maura. He is Ngara Ward MCA and Secretary General of the County Assemblies Forum. Also with us is political analyst Billy Mijungu and political analyst Advice Mundalo. Gentlemen, many thanks for your time today and for a very productive conversation. Thank you too for watching. My name is Michelle Ngele Obiambo. Do enjoy the rest of your viewing. Good morning.